Big Seance Podcast, episode 181. Timothy Stevens and his feature film, The Ghost Lights.
How can we make a film for $7,000 and, make it look big? And, our answer to that was, okay, I'll film it. I actually play a role in the film as well. And then that one light becomes two, and they start kind of making these parallel figure eights, big sweeping figure eights, and they're staying in tandem. A couple of minutes later, those two become four. And then suddenly there's four lights, and they're arcing.
Wow.
And then those four become six. And then a couple of minutes later, all six of them burst. It's not just a ghost story. It's not just a, UFO X-Files type story. It is that. It's a story about loss in trying to bridge a gap and mend a relationship.
Welcome to the Big Seance Podcast. I'm Patrick Keller of BigSeance.com, and this is a place for an open discussion on all things paranormal, but specifically topics like ghosts and hauntings, paranormal research, spirit communication, psychics and mediums, and life after death. So basically, anything that pops up in my paranormal world. The candles are already lit, so you might as well come on in and join the seance.
Have you ever had a near-death experience? Or do you have a friend or loved one who has a story of their own NDE? I would love to hear from them or from you. 2 episodes ago, in episode 179, I shared just how you can get your story to me. So be sure to check that out. I'm looking forward to putting an episode together soon, and I can't wait to share your stories. In the next episode, I look forward to sharing the second half of my interview with Lonnie Scott, where we discuss the topic of hypnosis and his work featured in the hit documentary series Hellier. So look forward to that. And without further ado, here's a brand new interview with friend and Paranerd Timothy Stevens. Get your tea poured. Timothy Stevens has worked for over a decade in the industry and began his work in television and film shortly after graduating from film school at the University of North Texas. His first professional experience came from the cable network Ride TV. Timothy has worked nearly every department, beginning first as an editor, then camera operator, and later as a writer and story producer. He now directs and produces scripted and reality television while producing award-winning independent horror and action short films. He has also written more than a dozen short and feature screenplays. His goal? To write and direct thrilling and thoughtful horror films. Today, Timothy is here to discuss his upcoming film project called The Ghost Lights. And you can find out more about Timothy and his work at spectrographfilms.com. And I will put that link and lots of cool links in the show notes for this episode. Tim appeared on the show. Hopefully you remember. Longtime Paranerds might remember. 5 years ago in episode 69, where we talked about his then new film, The Resurrectionist. So that's Timothy's bio, but you must know that ever since our first meeting here on the show, I have so admired Timothy's style. He just looks like he landed here from another mysterious time in history. And if you've heard his first appearance on the show, you know he does an amazing Dracula impersonation, like award-winning Dracula.
Man, I forgot about that.
Yeah, and you embarrassed me because you made me do the impersonation too, and you did such a better job. And he's gone live in the Big Seance Parlor on Facebook with his beautiful wife while they've been on road trips and staying in haunted locations. And he's also given us a tour. I was so excited this day when you gave us a tour of so many of the delicious items and books that you have in your home. And so he is truly one of us, and I appreciate him participating in our community for such a long time. Welcome back to the Parlor, Timothy.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me on. Man, I'd forgotten about the Dracula thing. That's hilarious.
Yeah, and you, I mean, you could have been in that film for sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Gary Oldman was okay, but I mean, I could probably do better.
You could have done it.
Hey, so funny thing, you'll enjoy this. I just found out that Gary Oldman and Gary Numan, the here in my car, I feel, that guy, the 80s, they were born in the same month. They were March 1958. And here's what I thought. I thought Gary Numan would be younger than Gary Oldman, right? Given their last names. Gary Oldman is 2 weeks younger than Gary Newman. So
I thought you were going to tell me they were brothers.
No,
and that was
maybe really they are. Funny. No, but yeah, isn't that weird? Anyway,
that is weird.
That's
like
note.
Driveway Parkway.
Yeah, right. That makes no sense.
I don't know. Maybe not.
Anyway. Well, yeah, thanks for having me back on. I'm realizing I need to update my bio there because I am now a feature filmmaker, and I put short films on there. So
there you go.
Anyway, so I get on the website in a second.
I'm glad we could wake you up to that detail.
Awesome.
And you, before we jump into the ghost lights, let's talk really quickly about what you've been up to in the 5 years since we've heard from you last. You've had some big, life adventures since 5 years ago.
I have. Well, I have to ask really quick. Are you going to ask me what I'm drinking? Do we still do that?
Oh, I haven't done that in such a long time. So tell us what you're drinking.
Jameson.
Okay,
Irish whiskey.
Way cooler than me. I would be lying under the table if I.
Well, I'm going to take it slow, we don't, you don't want me telling, stupid stories by the end of the podcast. So I'll take it easy.
I don't do classy hard stuff very, very often.
Well, Irish, it's in my blood, so I can handle it. It's
got it.
Yeah. It's probably not a good thing, honestly, but well, man, the last 5 years. Well, I started Spectrograph Films, which is my new production company, along with my business partner, John Francis McCullough. He was actually the co-producer of The Resurrectionist that we had talked about in the old episode. At the time, we were just kind of working together independently. But now we've got a full-fledged production company that we started late 2019. And man, I guess I've done a few shorts. I did a cool Ouija board short called A Visitor, and I think that is new since. And you may have seen the in that live video that I did on the Facebook group. You may have seen that Ouija board. It's this cool 1914 William Fold board. It's like 110, 120 years old. Really cool. And a lot of it has just been working in, TV and, paid gigs and writing a lot and kind of getting ready for, what we did recently in 2020, our very first feature film, a lot of kind of mental prep work that gets ready for going from short films to feature films. A big leap for sure.
And you also have a young son now.
I do, yeah. In March of last year, 2 or 3 days before the first lockdown, my wife had a little baby boy, and now he's nearly a year old. And that's been a crazy adventure too. I'm looking forward because right now he doesn't really comprehend a whole lot besides running around and screaming and crawling. I'm looking forward to indoctrinating him in the Paranerd ways when the time comes. So right now he could care less, you know.
And we were talking before we started recording about, I mean, I can't imagine how anxious you were raising a new infant in the middle of this pandemic, and not really in the middle of it, like right when it kicked off, when we knew even less about how this thing was going to go than we do now. That had to have been just frantic and crazy.
Yeah, I mean that's like a nice word for it, frantic. You know, I don't know. It's I mean, yeah, it's I'm sure. You know, I mean, it's hard for all parents, no matter the time, you know.
But new parents, too. I mean,
yeah. No, it's certainly a huge challenge, you know. Like, you take for granted, like, just being able to, like, go to Walmart or Target with, you know, your baby. You know, I see people doing that, and I secretly judge them. But yeah, I mean, because you want to, you know, you want to give your kid that experience, and we have to kind of tell ourselves, well, you know, this will be over at some point, and then he can have those experiences.
Right.
You know, thankfully, we live in a state, you know, I live in Texas, and, you know, the rules are maybe could be more stringent, but they're a little relaxed. So we can go out to parks and, you know, safely take him outdoors. So, you know, I mean, there's experiences to be had, but yeah, you know, spend a lot of time at home like we all have.
Well, a late congratulations to you both. That's very cool.
Thank you.
So you have an Indiegogo campaign that is beginning. It's open now, but it started on February 15th and it will last for a month. And it is for a feature film that you're working on called The Ghost Lights. And I am going to read the description of The Ghost Lights.
Do it.
So it says, a journalist returns home after the death of her father and discovers a mysterious cassette tape describing strange disappearances and mysterious lights appearing in the skies of West Texas. In an effort to connect with the memory of her late father, she sets out on a cross-state road trip to discover the truth. The Ghost Lights is the culmination of a dream, our first feature film made during the most challenging year of our lives, during a pandemic, with a crew of 4 people, 10 days, over 1,000 miles from Dallas to Terlingua. I hope I said that right.
You did. Good job.
Okay, good. And back. A newborn at home and lots of coffee. And I'm assuming on the Indiegogo page, they'll be able to see the little teaser for the film.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. That will be up there along with a, you know, the typical kind of Indiegogo Kickstarter sort of video with me sort of talking a little bit. Some of the stuff that you just shared, I share in there as well. So
it's a great sneak peek and it will have you asking questions. So tell us the story behind the film. I can't wait to hear about this.
Well, so, I mean, you asked me what I was working on the last 5 years. And one really cool project that unfortunately, like a lot of television, never made it to the light of day was a pilot episode that was going to be a kind of paranormal television show. And we looked at a lot of stuff and ultimately landed on the Marfa Lights as our story. And so I did a lot of research and I talked to witnesses. I mean, it was like full on like journalistic investigation, which was a lot of fun for me. And unfortunately, that project just kind of, you know, didn't happen. Just fine. Happens all the time. But the story of the Marfa Lights just kind of was sitting in the back of my brain. And then as, you know, 2020 rolled around, my business partner and I, John Francis McCullough, we've been trying to seek funding for feature films for, 5 years since we talked last. And, you know, 2020 didn't really drain the bank accounts of investors, but they tightened up, you know. And so we really just were looking at, okay, like what can we do ourselves? And, you know, I started to look at stories that inspired me, and the Marfa Lights just kind of emerged, you know, kind of out of the the darkness, so to speak. And it's such a cool story. So Marfa, Texas is this little ghost town out in West Texas. You can imagine like what most people think of when they think of Texas, right? Tumbleweeds, desert landscapes, the mountains. That's certainly not Dallas, but that is what Marfa is. And, it's this cool artsy town. It could almost be called like a little miniature Austin. Like it's very cool and eclectic. But for the better part of, like 150, 200 years, could be even longer, there has been this phenomena of these lights appearing over, it's called the Mitchell Flats. It's this big flat area. It's a prehistoric seabed. At one point, millions of years ago, it was the bed of an ocean. And people have been seeing these flickering lights appearing where there are no ranches, there's no city, there's no highway. And they do weird things. They will appear just after sunset. It's not a guaranteed thing. Like if you go there, you might see them, you might not. And they'll usually appear just one or two of them, and then they'll split and become four. And then there might be six of them. They change colors from red to green to blue. And they start doing figure eights and corkscrews and just wild stuff. And it happens, the phenomena of ghost lights is not a exclusive thing to Marfa. It happens all over the world. The difference in Marfa is maybe it's the flat terrain, maybe it's truly, kind of a special place, but it happens on a regular enough basis that people have been able to scientifically study these things because, you can set up a camera and, 2 out of 7 days, probably they'll be there. And, there's been plenty of studies, and to my opinion, I can talk more about this if you want to, it's all inconclusive. They have no idea. Some people have said they're headlights. There's no highway that direction. There's theories about like swamp gas and the idea of, St. Elmo's fire, which doesn't work either because geologically, the elements aren't there.
The swamp gas thing has always made my head explode. It seems like such a lame reason for a cool phenomena. It's like swamp gas. What?
Yeah, it's funny. I've been watching a lot of X-Files, and there's an episode where Scully throws that out. It's like, oh, it must be swamp gas. But anyway, that made me laugh. But it, maybe that's true in some places. There's no swamp out there. Like, so what is it? There's one man named James Bennell who, for about 10 years, he had high-speed cameras set up at the Marfa Lights viewing station. There's actually it's so popular in Marfa, they built a little viewing station with with power and lights and, a little overhang where you can go watch from. And so what he did is he put up cameras there on a near nightly basis for about 10 years. And he has some of the most stunning video and photography of the lights that have ever been captured. And he determined that it was some sort of plasma igniting and burning. And to me, that also kind of doesn't work. It makes sense to me. When you think about some sort of element capturing on fire, you might think of something like a flash of light, like fire bursting, almost like flash paper if you've seen magicians set that on fire. But these things hang around for hours at a time, and they move, what could be miles across the desert at insane speeds. So the idea that it's like something burning, just doesn't work for me. And the idea that they're headlights doesn't work for me either, because if they're headlights, they would be gone in a, however long it would take for a car to drive by, a matter of seconds, minutes, tops. So I don't know. There's a lot of different theories besides that are a lot more interesting to me. The non-scientific stuff, the paranormal stuff, I'm very intrigued by.
Okay, I guess I have a couple questions. Let me ask both. So number one, do you always have to be in the same place? Like you mentioned the little stand that they set up. I wonder if it's like if you can be in multiple locations. And the other thing is, are they always seen off in the distance, or do people ever like get to see them up close?
So I have really cool answers to both of those things. No, most people casually going out to see the lights, they go to the station because that just like makes sense. There's somebody I know, and because I'm kind of keeping privacy here. I'm not going to mention their name, but they own a.
How dare you?
Oh, I know. Sorry. They own a ranch south of Marfa, maybe 15 minutes, and he has been seeing the lights up close and personal for decades. And by up close and personal, I mean, this is what he claims, is within 2 or 3 feet.
Wow.
And that kind of experience is much different than seeing like flickering lights. What he told me was he witnessed this massive ball of energy, something. And, there's weird phenomena where it doesn't cast a shadow. So it's almost, you see the source, but it's as if the light is omnipresent. And, there's possible memory loss associated with it because he will take people out to see the lights. And there's been people that have witnessed the lights up close and personal. And then after the experience, they have either vague memories or no memory of the experience whatsoever, almost as if they've had like a traumatic experience with it. So that's weird. And I certainly would like to have that kind of experience. I have not. And there's another cool story, and you can actually find this online. There was a Reverend Sutter, was his name, in 1994, was out more south of the viewing area trying to have an up-close experience with the lights. And he was out there with his family, I believe. And it was either his daughter or someone else spotted one of the lights passing over a country road. And so they race towards it. He gets out of the car and goes up to it, and it's somewhere, maybe 10 yards vertical of him up in the sky. And it's pretty big. I think he describes it as being kind of softball size. And as it is descending, it shrinks. And then he holds out his finger, and by the time it gets down to his hand, it's the size of a firefly. He said it was very cold out there. I think it was in December, January, maybe February. And so he doesn't remember specifically, like any temperature changes whenever it touched him, but he just said that it shrunk down, landed on his finger, and then flickered away to nothing. And, he has been interviewed about this. He's, I would say, a pretty credible witness. And, those kind of experiences are few and far between. Most people just experience them 10 miles, 5-10 miles. It's kind of hard to tell at a distance. But certain people seem to be in the right place at the right time. They have these very strange up-close encounters. And that even further, to my mind, goes to show that these are not headlights. There's something else going on there.
I cannot wait to hear if listeners reach out who have had experiences with the Marfa Lights. That would be awesome if people would.
They have to. Yeah.
Either reach out to me or reach out to Timothy. You just must.
Yeah, please let me know.
The description I read of the ghost lights already discussed filming in a pandemic. Also, just, you mentioned the funding issues that happen in the middle of a pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I want you to talk about the challenges in general, but also like, I can imagine that you're probably forced to be really creative, and you probably end up having some cool experiences by forcing yourself to think out of the box. That's what I would imagine.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. First and foremost, the biggest challenge was COVID. Because I wanted to make sure that we were being 100% safe. We filmed in October of last year, and I ended up paying for it out of pocket, and I don't mind saying the budget was $7,000, which, if you know anything about indie film, even, 500,000 to $1 million is considered low budget. So I don't know what 7,000 is. That's micro budget, sub micro budget. I don't. There's no word for it. But one thing I knew is that we needed to make sure that we were all being safe, because big feature films, when you've got 50 million, 100 million to spend, you can afford to put your entire cast and crew up in a hotel for 2 weeks, basically rule out any virus, test them after they get out of a quarantine, and then keep them in that hotel through the duration of filming. So they only come to set, they go back to their hotel. That's great, and, you're testing your cast and crew every 2 or 3 days. Cool. I wish we could afford that. Most actors don't have their own health insurance, so it's not going to pay for a test. So that means I have to pay for a test, and I'm going to, because I want to keep them safe. So our answer to that is that we COVID tested everybody at the front, and we kept cast and crew down to an absolute minimum. Fortunately, the story only called for about 3 people on screen. For the most part, it's just Alex, our main character. She's pretty much just on screen by herself for most of the film. So, we kind of got to do a cool thing where we all get COVID tested and we just live together for 10 days.
A bubble.
Yeah, no, an absolute bubble. And it was kind of surreal, honestly. At one point, towards the end of filming, we were all, we got an Airbnb out in the middle of the Big Bend, beautiful area in West Texas. And, we're sitting out and, we have a couple of beers, someone's smoking a cigar, and we're under this just brilliant nighttime sky, Milky Way. And I'm going like, is this real life? Like, where's the pandemic? And it was kind of special, honestly, because we got to create this kind of little experience. And you hate that you have to pay for those kind of experiences, that we could only do it as a job, because, in the old world, you could just go do that, right? It wouldn't be a problem. But it was kind of neat in a way. But, thankfully nobody got sick. We were able to keep everybody safe. So, that was a main challenge. The second challenge really was, money. How can we make a film for $7,000 and, make it look big? And, our answer to that was, okay, I'll film it. I actually play a role in the film as well. My co-producer, John Francis McCulley, he plays the father character that you mentioned in the log line that you read earlier. And then we pretty much, besides a sound guy, you shouldn't trust me with a microphone. We had a sound guy on set. So apart from that, it was basically 4 of us for 10 days shooting 12 to 14. Our longest day was 18 hours, which I don't recommend to anybody. And we shot and we were dead exhausted, but it was a passion project for all of us. And we shot in just an amazing epic landscape out in the desert and in the mountains of far west Texas. And I think because of that, it feels like a big epic film. So, while we're making on the shoestring indie budget, the acting and then really the setting sets it apart, I think. And, it's not going to look like something filmed for that budget. And, these were choices we made to give kind of space and grandeur to the story.
Where did your story for this movie come from? Is it the legends that you've kind of already discussed? Is this a completely fictional thing? Where did the story come from?
Yeah, it really was inspired by the research that I did on the Marfa Lights. That and around 2017, my wife and I took a trip out to Terlingua, which is this cool old ghost town out. It's just on the edge of the state park, Big Bend. And technically, really, geologically, it's a part of the Big Bend. And we went out there for Day of the Dead festival. And, back in the late 1800s, the Terlingua mines opened up there, and they were mining this red rock called cinnabar, which is used to make mercury. And most of the miners were coming across from Mexico, so it is this very heavily Hispanic culture influenced area. And there's this beautiful old cemetery, which we actually filmed in for the Ghost Lights. And every year they hold this really cool Day of the Dead festival. And, I went out there, I took my film camera and shot a bunch of stills. And really just, years later, I was like, man, I've got to film something in Terlingua. I don't know what, but I'm going to do it. And, that really combined with the story of the Marfa Lights. And I thought, okay, why don't we take this real phenomena, this real unexplained strangeness that happens out in West Texas, and instead of having it in Marfa, let's put it in Terlingua. And what if, there's this old miner that was there in the 40s, the 50s, and what if he had a strange experience with this? And what if it's more than just lights in the desert? What if there's something going on with these? I don't want to give away too much, but basically He has a traumatic event as a child and then young adult. And, he is so affected by it that he feels like he's got to get it off his chest, which is why he's being interviewed by our main character's father back in the 70s. And then, of course, she finds this cassette tape with the recordings, and she also discovers that possibly this miner might still be alive and might still be living out in Terlingua. So she thinks, okay, there's more to be told here, and I'm going to go out and finish this story. So, there's elements of true history there, and then there's also elements of just kind of this, this fictional story. And, really, I think it is a sci-fi thriller, but the crux of the story is really the relationship between Alex and her father, who she feels she didn't have the best of relationships with. And she's trying to kind of, this act of going out into the desert and listening to the tape and trying to complete the story is almost, and I feel like I can use this language here because we're on the Big Seance podcast, but it's a form of channeling, I think, and she's really trying to reach back in time and reach, across the Great Divide, so to speak, to mend a relationship, and so I think that's really what the story is about, and I think that's also what makes it maybe a little bit more accessible. It's not just a ghost story; it's not just a UFO X-Files type story. It is that. It's a story about, loss in trying to bridge a gap and mend a relationship.
That makes me think of any time I've done a grave adoption and, done some genealogy. I've always done research on the grave I'm looking after and the soul buried there. And I've always, when you immerse yourself in someone's life and in someone's information, you really feel kind of connected to them for a while. And I feel like they're there sometimes. And I've had those moments. And so, I'm sure when it's a loved one, it can be that way where you really are feeling like you're channeling. That's cool.
Yeah. And it's, I hadn't really thought about this until just now, but somewhere over here in my closet, I've actually got an old cassette tape of my great grandfather telling stories. And, he's talking about stories growing up. And, he grew up in the oil fields of West Texas around Odessa and that sort of thing. So he's talking about some of those stories and old songs that they used to sing. But, it's now that I think about it, listening to that tape is kind of the same thing. I'm sure we've all done that. It feels like a piece of our loved ones. And there's something cool and visceral and physical about a cassette tape that I think, and photographs are the same way, but it's magnetic. It's literally magnetic. And, there's something to be said about, that physicality where you just, maybe it feels just a little bit more real, like you're actually connecting with their memory.
Absolutely. You mentioned before that your crew had an actual encounter with the real lights during
We did.
filming. So I'm anxious to hear about what happened there.
Yeah. So I'll kind of back up and give some preface. So we had been filming for, maybe this might have been day 9, something like this. So you can imagine we're like dead, exhausted.
Yeah.
And, I personally don't do well on like little sleep. And I start, especially when it's my production, like I can get like really bent out of shape about small stuff. I'll readily admit that. And we had been filming our big finale scene up on what they call Big Hill outside of Alpine, Texas. This big, beautiful vista that overlooks the valley. Really cool. And, it took a little bit longer to film there, so we were running a little bit behind. And we had one more scene, and really it's a single take scene that we were going to film actually on Highway 65 outside of Marfa on the way to the Marfa Lights viewing station. But we needed light, just a little bit of light, kind of on the perimeter, just to be able to kind of see well enough on camera. So, I'm thinking we're going to make it. We get in the car. We rent this cool Mini Cooper that we feature in the film that you'll see in the trailer. And we're headed that direction. And I know that if we can just get there, it's like 7:30-ish, we'll be fine. But I had forgotten, because we were in such a rush, that we still had our fake license plate on the Mini Cooper. And you want to do that because, especially when you're renting a car, you want to make sure that the actual license plate is not there. So we had fake ones. And normally we switch them out before we go from location to location, but we're in such a rush that, if we sit down to do that, we'll lose our shot.
Those are some of the details that non-filmmakers would never think about.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you never see real license plates in a film. And if you do, they made a mistake. It's not good because you rent your cars from people and you want to keep those people private. So we're rushing there along I-65 and it's getting dark. And in my rearview mirror, we see cop lights. And so the state trooper pulls us over. Everything's cool. We explain what we're doing. He understands, why we have fake plates on. But I don't know, maybe it's the West Texas kind of like take your sweet time mentality. No one's ever in a rush out in West Texas. It takes forever for him to, go through his spiel. And so I'm getting really anxious. We finally, get done. He just gives us a warning. Thank you, Alpine Police Department. And we're going, but by the time we reach our spot, it is like pitch black. And I'm pissed right now, more at myself. We pull over, I get out of the car, probably say a couple of choice words, throw my hat into the middle of the darkness because I'm just like, I'm so angry, and sleep deprived. And our main actress, Katriva Phillips, she gets out of the car, lights up a cigarette, and looks out over the desert and goes, "Hey, Timothy, what's that over there?" And I take a look, and maybe, like I said, it's hard to measure the distance because you don't know how big or small these things are. We see this little dot of light and it starts to grow. And it's kind of a whitish orange color. And then that one light becomes 2. And they start kind of making these parallel figure eights, big sweeping figure eights, and they're staying in tandem. And then a couple of minutes later, those 2 become 4. And then suddenly there's 4 lights and they're arcing. And if I had to guess, they're making, 500-foot sweeps, at least, big sweeps. And then those 4 become 6. And then a couple of minutes later, all 6 of them burst different directions. So if there is any belief that maybe this was like a single like UFO, maybe, and we're looking at lights along a saucer, that is obliterated in that moment because they all go different directions. One of them starts doing corkscrews up in the air, and then another one kind of does little ziggy zags off one direction. And, there's a term that's used by the guys in the podcast, Astonishing Legends, which we definitely experience, which they call paranormal apathy. And it's where in the moment you, for whatever reason, you like don't take out your phones. You don't turn on the cameras. If they're on, they stay like, down by your side. And we were just mesmerized by the Marfa Lights. And, here we are with like good cameras and, we've all got a phone and no one does anything. We're just like glued. And who knows how long it might have been. 30 minutes, it might have been more. I don't know. Time kind of stood still for a little bit. And so I have no idea how long we watched these things go. But at one point, they all kind of zipped back together. And then there was 6 and 4 and 2. And then there was 1. And then it flickered off into the darkness like it had never been there. And, once they kind of disappeared, it was kind of magical. Like, all that frustration and stress, the days of not sleeping kind of just fell off. And, suddenly it kind of reminded us why we were all doing this, why we make film. We're sort of conjuring dreams in a way. And sometimes those surreal experiences are reality, and sometimes like you experience those things, and I gotta say it's life-changing when you see something that has no explanation. I can tell you they are not headlights. How could headlights do the things that I just described? And I'd heard all these stories by this point, and so it's one thing to hear the stories, it's totally another thing to see it for yourself because it defies explanation. To me, it's as good as seeing an apparition, almost. I would still like to see a ghost. That would be cool. But I have seen ghost lights. And in what they are, I don't know. There's a lot of cool stories, a lot of cool legends. But I really don't know what these lights out in West Texas are.
Well, you mentioned, paranormal apathy, which is interesting. I'm interested to hear that you called it, or you compared it to seeing an apparition, because I was just going to ask you, physiologically, what goes on in your body, or what feelings do you have? Is there some kind of deeper experience that any of you were having when you see these? I mean, especially if you're watching it for 30 minutes and no one thinks to pick up a camera, what is your body experiencing or your mind experiencing?
Yeah.
Is it more than just seeing the lights off in the distance?
Yeah. And we kind of explore that in the film as well. So it's interesting to have experienced it for ourselves. But, it's not like we were catatonic. We were talking about it. We were, we were each exchanging like, oh my God, did you see that? This is amazing. It's almost almost kind of a euphoria, like an ecstatic experience, if that makes sense, to where, there's adrenaline. And, I had talked to our star in the film is a guy named Billy Blair. People may have seen him in Rob Zombie films. He's been in he was in the Machete films by Robert Rodriguez. Really cool guy. He grew up in El Paso, so basically the same area. It's a little bit, a couple hours away. But he talked about seeing what he thought was a UFO as a kid, and we actually will be releasing a video of him talking about this experience that you can look at on our Facebook page coming soon. He talked about is like you see it and you get the surge of adrenaline. And then once it's gone, you're left with this kind of afterglow that fades. And then suddenly you want to see it again. And it's an addictive experience. It's probably the same thing about when you get your first EVP and you get that thrill that, soon fades and suddenly you're chasing the next one. I'm sure it's why some people become career paranormal investigators, despite the hours of drudgery that real, investigation takes. So I don't know. It's like I said, it's kind of a euphoria. Like you think you're going to be like afraid in that, or you're going to be catatonic, but you really aren't, or at least we weren't. To me, it wasn't the same experience as like seeing a beautiful sunrise. Or watching an eclipse or seeing a comet, that kind of like cosmic belittling that happens where you go like, man, like I'm so small in this vast universe, and there's so much that I don't know. And, and isn't that a cool and beautiful thing?
In my recent conversation with Lonnie Scott, he was thinking back to his early experience from childhood where he saw his first apparition. And it got us having this conversation about, everybody thinks they know what they're going to do when they see their first apparition. Mm-hmm. And then there's what really happens when you see, it might be a little different than what you planned. And I still haven't seen my first. So
yeah, never seen a ghost either. There's some stuff as a kid that I thought I saw a few things, but, I kind of might chalk that off to like, imagination. So I mean, I've certainly, like the Facebook Live video we did at the Excelsior House Hotel in Jefferson, I real time saw the doorknob shake when there's like no one in the hallway. I heard knocks on a wall that goes to the sunroom that we had there. I mean, that's pretty cool. It's not as cool as seeing an apparition, but it's another one of those things where you're just like, you're not afraid. You're just like, holy shit, that just happened. Wow.
You also had some really cool stuff that came through the Ouija board.
Yeah, we did.
I am so appreciative of, and I wish more people would do it in the Parlor when you're on a cool trip or when you're having an overnight experience, or you just want to give everybody a look at some of their nerdy collections, do a Facebook Live in there. That's pretty cool. That got people talking. It was a cool night.
Yeah. Man, that's such a cool place. Jefferson in general. It's every town says they're the most haunted city in whatever state, but I truly think Jefferson is a special place. It's a hub of paranormal activity for sure.
So I do have two more fun questions for you, but I want to ask you to give us anything else we need to know about the Indiegogo, about what people need to know about this film. And then I'm going to ask you two nerdy questions.
Okay. Yeah. So as you mentioned, February 15th, we launched the Indiegogo campaign. And, if you're familiar with Kickstarter, it's similar to that. A lot of people do GoFundMes. How we are different is that, unlike a GoFundMe where you give us money and we say thank you, and that's the end of it. On Indiegogo, we actually offer perks in return for that. So, you donate a certain amount and we offer something in return. So we have signed posters that we'll be giving out. We've got, in some of the higher levels, we've got actual props used in the making of the film. One of them is that fake plates that I said we got pulled over for. Probably the coolest perk that we're giving away is we'll actually be taking the interview portions of the film, because we've she's listening to the tapes and there's these flashbacks to her father interviewing the man from Terlingua. We're actually taking all of those scenes and dubbing them to vintage cassette tapes, and then labeling them just like the props in the film. So if you happen to have a cassette player, then you can actually, and it'll be cool and kind of garbly because that's how old tapes sound. Uh-huh. And, it's going to feel like a piece of evidence, like, something that you might find in like a shelf from the X-Files, something real, tangible. So, but yeah, we need to raise $15,000. This is going to pay for color, which, not a lot of people know this, but when you shoot something, you shoot in RAW, which is similar to like what you do for photographs. So it comes out looking very like flat. So we have a guy lined up that's going to make it look beautiful, just like you expect a feature film to look. Special effects as well, because it is a sci-fi film, and we want to show the ghost lights up close and personal. So that's computer CGI. And then we also have an original score that's being made, which you can hear a taste of in our teaser that we have on the Indiegogo. So yeah, and these are all cinema filmmaking professionals that deserve to be paid for what they're doing. So we're trying to raise a little bit of money, and the film is done. It's in the can. I finished editing because that's one thing that I can do. So we're just like just that far away from getting there, and just need a little bit extra help.
Well, this is so exciting, and I'm excited for you. Congratulations. But also, I should have asked you. You have had some good things to say about this composer, and I want to give you the opportunity to talk about, him and the music.
Yeah. Our composer's name is Brandon Maahs, and I actually met him back in my days at the University of North Texas. UNT is primarily a music college, and there's people that come from all across the U.S. to get a music education. Nora Jones, do you know her? She went to UNT actually.
Cool.
There's like one of her records is like in a shrine almost on campus. But just really well known for music. And so I met him there, and he did one of my student films. But yeah, he's just this crazy talented guy that can pull out these like Hans Zimmer-esque scores that just have like depth and and grandeur, and that's one thing that you'll hear in the trailer is that it has this epic feel to it. And we're definitely like he's still in the writing process right now. One thing we're discussing is that kind of like Fortean sound. So what is the sound of experiencing something outside the realm of the normal? What is the music equivalent of having a paranormal experience? And those are really esoteric conversations that we're having, but they're fun conversations, and you as a music teacher, I'm sure you kind of get that, it's, how do we take the kind of intangibles and make them into the tangible, which is, the written music there on the page. So I'm super excited about that. He's one of those people that, he's a future Hans Zimmer. Believe me, you're going to see him, with major motion picture scores before long. So hopefully, this is like a step along the way for him as well.
Little fun fact, the first time I'd ever been to Texas was in my undergrad when I was briefly a music composition major. And it was in Arlington, University of Texas, Arlington.
Oh, UTA. Cool.
It was a composition festival. And that was a time period where music composition programs were very avant-garde and very not Hans Zimmer and not John Williams or any of those things. And that was me. There wasn't wasn't a lot of, melody and harmony, and that bugged me, and I didn't fit in. And so I was like, peace out. But I do remember going to UTA and just kind of experiencing my brief experience being a composition nerd.
Right. And it's actually still that way. UNT specifically has a big like avant-garde jazz thing. They're specifically known for jazz. In fact, like before COVID, you could go to, a number of bars any night of the week and just hear amazing jazz from these virtuoso students that have come from all over the world. So, man, it's more things that we've lost temporarily, hopefully, because of COVID. So,
okay, so I've got this new thing where I have these cards.
Ooh.
And I just picked a couple that I thought were good. Now, these are random and not having to do with film or paranormal or anything. You ready? I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm ready. Hit me.
What is something you get wrong almost every time you do it?
Oh, man, that's a mean question.
You're welcome.
Something I get wrong. Well, I mean, I could probably talk about some personal interrelationship stuff, but that might be sharing too much.
I'm not going to make you go there if you don't want to.
Okay. Well, there's a couple of words that I can never spell. I can never spell the word license.
Oh my gosh, I can totally relate to that one.
Yeah,
I always want to.
It doesn't matter, and I type that all the time because we license music in film. We I mean, that word gets used a lot.
I always want to put an S before the C.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Is that what you do?
Yeah. I don't even know what I do. It's just like I start typing in my brain, it turns off. And I call myself a writer too, which is not good.
I have issues with words that have double letters. Like I want to double letters all the time when they're not supposed to be doubles, like L's.
Yeah.
And
or like
R's.
travel. Like for some reason, I always want to put 2 L's in travel.
Because when you traveled, you put 2 L's in it.
Do you?
Right? Do you?
I don't know.
I'm going to have to Google that now and feel really dumb when I go.
Yeah. I mean, I use, what's that software that you can plug into your computer that helps you type correctly?
Yes. I totally know what you're talking about.
So.
Okay, nice. Well, thanks for your honesty there.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So who would you most like to sit next to on a 10-hour flight and why?
Oh, gosh. Living or dead?
I'm going to say either.
Either. Okay. Well, maybe I'll do both. Okay. Let's start with living. Man, who, there's a lot of filmmakers I really respect. Francis Ford Coppola would be a really cool guy to talk to. He's one of those kind of polymath filmmakers where he, you could give him, I believe, an instrument or a keyboard, and he could probably make a score, and he could write the thing, and he can direct the thing. Scorsese actually would be like another person that I would really want to talk to, because he's one of those people that he's a literary filmmaker. I think Coppola, because he clearly has interest in the paranormal. He has interest in Gothic storytelling, like Coppola's Dracula. Scorsese, I think, would be amazing just because he's such a history buff. He does films like Silence, the film about the missionaries in Japan in the 13th or 14th century. And he does this intense amount of research, even if he doesn't need to. A director doesn't necessarily need to. They could just get the script and they can trust the art department to get it correct. And just, execute the thing, and that's fine. But he doesn't do that. He immerses himself in it. And, I'm definitely a history buff as well. Dead. Let's see. Dead. Oh gosh. I think it would be really fun to sit down with, Harry Price, the old school, paranormal ghost hunter.
Can I crash your flight?
No.
I shouldn't say crash your
wrong. Well, I mean, he's already dead, so I'm the only one that stands to lose.
Can I crash your conversation, I guess? Can I crash your flight?
Oh, yeah. Oh. Yes, absolutely. But man, I very recently read The Most Haunted House in England about the Borley Rectory. Good book. And, while I know there's people that think that he staged a bunch of those things, it's a good book, but it's very dry. And so I don't know how someone, if you're faking all this stuff, amp it up a little bit, right? He experienced very, for the most part, subdued paranormal activity, but he was so meticulous about documenting. And, he would never be like one of these modern ghost hunting shows that hears a little thud and goes, oh my God, did you see that? Did you see that? Dude, look, I'm talking about there. Yeah. Bro. Because he would lock down the place. Truly, he would black out windows. He would put metal tape across doors. He would, in his little notebook, mark the exact location of every object in the entirety of Borley Rectory. So if anything moved, he would know it. And if anything moved by the volition of someone else, like a physical person there, he would know it. And I don't know, he just seems like a really cool dude. Have you ever read his handbook on paranormal investigation? He wrote a little pamphlet on it.
I have read 2 Vincent Price things. I don't think that was one
Harry
of them.
Price.
Harry Price, Vincent Price. I'm thinking Michael Jackson Thriller.
But anyway, so back to my point. One of his necessary items of every ghost hunter, he's got like a little pack of things, briefcase that he takes with him. One of them is a little vial of brandy. And it's such a British thing, that if you feel faint, or you've had a traumatic experience, take a little sip of brandy, and that'll work you right up, and you'll be just fine. And I love that. Why are we not all carrying brandy in our ghost hunting packs?
He also kept powder, and I remember I read that book when I was very early into my paranormal investigation, and I remember just reading about what he would do with the powder, to prove if something walked over it or moved something. And then also just something as simple as drawing a freaking circle around something so that chalk. You would know if it would move. And I remember reading that like, shut up. Why don't people do this?
Because it's not TV
not flashy
stuff. Yeah, it's not flashy. It's funny though that there are ghost hunters starting to utilize that sort of thing, especially the powder elements. I even saw a movie. There's a really cool paranormal thriller on Netflix called The Ghosts of War. And it's like a World War II ghost story. Really cool. And they actually use powder in there to document, tracks and that sort of thing. And I kind of want to do that in a movie now too, because the idea of seeing these footprints show up, either, in real time or coming back later and finding them, there's something kind of chilling about that.
Well, dare I ask, speaking of what you might want to do, dare I ask what might be coming up in the future, even beyond the ghost lights? For you?
Yeah. Well, a little bit on the ghost lights. So we are pushing for film festivals right now, and that's kind of why we're trying to rush to get finished. Most of the horror, sci-fi geared film festivals happen in September, October, and November. And all those deadlines for submission are like basically now. So we are like, hightailing it to get that finished. So probably the first time that people will be able to see the ghost lights is going to be in film festivals later this year. If all goes well, we'll get distribution, maybe even theatrical distribution. At the very least, you'll be able to see it on Amazon Prime at some point, either for free streaming or for rental. That's guaranteed. That's going to happen. It may be a year or a little bit longer before it's available for download. But I would definitely, follow us on Facebook for those updates as we, fill out the 2021 festival season. Apart from that, I've got a handful of feature film screenplays that are written. One of them that is a little bit more doable than others that actually deals with the occult and magic, which you just did an episode with a guy who is a kind of an occult magician, correct? Yeah, so I got for a time while I was writing that, and I really can't talk about it because it's still like on the DL, but the script itself. But there's a time when I was reading about like Aleister Crowley and like the Golden Dawn and ritual magic. I even like practiced a few things just to like see if I could get it right in the script, and some very weird things happened, which I wish to heaven I could tell you about, but that'll have to be in a future episode. Like real stuff happened. Yeah. And anyway, we'll just leave that off there. Apart from that, Spectrograph Films has another film that's we are filming right now. It is a action comedy that's not my thing so much as my business partner, John Francis McCullough. He's like a future, Bruce Lee, like he's like a kung fu maniac. He's kind of like Keanu Reeves, like he does all of his own stunts. So we're filming that right now, and we hope sometime in the next maybe 3 to 4 months to make an announcement about that movie. It'll be going through the same thing of film festivals and hopefully distribution. And it's hard to say beyond that. Like I said, my stuff is always the paranormal ghost stories and the weird.
That's why
stuff.
You're on this show.
Yeah, and I've got a backlog of scripts that unfortunately I can't film for $7,000. So this, hopefully the Ghost Lights is kind of a step down the road for being able to raise the kind of funds to do some of those bigger projects. I even have a ghost hunting script that's based on the guys that were doing all of the psi research at Duke University, Rhine. So, and man, I wish I could tell you about that, but that's also on the DL. So, yeah, big things coming. But I'm excited about the Ghost Lights and getting that out because it was a Herculean effort to make it amid the pandemic, and I'm super proud. And you're going to watch it and go man, 4 people, made this? No way.
Oh, I bet.
Because it's got scale and epicness, and it is. It's a story for people that enjoy those kind of paranormal stories about connecting with those that we've lost, and it's a moving story too, I think. So the easiest way to find our Indiegogo campaign is probably just to go to Indiegogo.com and search The Ghost Lights. We'll come up number 1 there. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram. We'll just be spamming the hell out of those feeds with the link as well.
And we'll also, have it directly linked in the show notes, so you can go to the Indiegogo page. But also just, if you're interested in more of what Timothy does, spectrographfilms.com will have that linked as well. Timothy Stevens, you rock!
Oh, thank you. You rock.
P.S. I love your glasses.
Oh, thank you. My little round Harry Potter friends here.
Love them.
Thanks.
Thank you to the following super paranerds who support the show at patreon.com/Big Seance. Jeffrey Fishbach, James Deacon, Melissa Armour, Anne Marie Sullivan, Justin J. Justin, Genesis, Natalie, Kim Robb, Jim Budd, Josiel Lorenzo, Susan Davey, Paula Mitchell, and Amy Park Gedicke. My supporters at the Parlor guest level, who can be found at bigseance.com/Parlor guests, are Linda of ShimmeringMoons.com, Anne Rekovich of OzParatech.com, Christine Ferrens, Jillian Martin, Mindy Kentop, Hope Battaglia, Cassie Keller, Diane Rax, Nettie, Dina DeCastro of Dina DeCastro Astrology, Peggy Hagen, Marion Hover Clairvoyant, Bruce Williams, Lana and John of Carbon Lilies, David Rubenstein, and Norman and Linda Keller. That sound you just heard was the above and beyond. There's not even a category for your level of support fireworks display. Because I have 5 awesome listeners who support the show at the $10 level. Glenna Becker, Steve Skinner, Kevin Gilbert, AJ Meredith, and James Wilfong. So thank you, Glenna, Steve, Kevin, AJ, and James. And thank you, Paranerds.
For show notes, including links to anything we may have mentioned in this episode, visit bigseance.com. You can find and subscribe to the show in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and just about anywhere podcasts are found. Do you have any comments or feedback? Go to bigseance.com/feedback to learn how to get your voice in a future show. Or you can call my feedback line, 7755-TELL-ME. That's 775-583-5563. Interested in learning how to promote and share the podcast? Go to bigseance.com/share. Thank you so much for listening. Unfortunately, it's time to blow the candles out, but we'll see you and light them again next time.